right. So let's talk about this evolution in the training space over the last few years. You've seen it, I've seen it. I I know for me, for what I do, I'm brought into more places, more units, more different different commands or this or that type of place is bringing me in there for shooting, and I'm meeting new people, and then I hear concepts that we've talked about online like regurgitated back to me from these guys, and it's like what I'm seeing is there is a push from the highest levels down to like just random people on social media that aren't carrying a gun professionally. They're just interested in training or whatever, and they're training too. And it seems like this whole thing is shifting very, very quickly. So could you talk about what you see and where you think things are headed?
Yeah, I think I've seen a major shift, kind of the easiest thing to look like destigmifying that there are these two camps, right? There's like the competitive or practical shooting camp, and then there's like the tactical camp or everyday, the guys that are more defensive minded. And kind of making everybody understand like shooting, right? You remove the context, it's all the same, right? Once you start pulling the trigger, it's a balance of speed and accuracy, and you're trying to make the bullets go where you want them to go as fast as possible. And the guys that actually own, all of that skill and ability in reality are the competitive shooters. And for years it was competition gets you killed, the targets don't shoot back. It was every excuse not to compete. And I've seen a lot of that barrier and that stigma just going away in the training space, which I think is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good way of putting it. It's a stigma. My sense is kind of, maybe you could speak to this because you were kind of in the military. You were in the mill in the 90s, even hearing about this stuff. But kind of my sense of it is there was high level units that were always getting training, like sort of the best possible training. We're going to jump with the best jumpers. We're going to shoot with the best shooters. We're going to drive with the best drivers. And that's the way they've kind of always done it. But then there's like other individuals, or let's say like the lower level type of units or people, like those people doing their training were sort of like protective, where they would structure everything so that like we're not really measuring or assessing ability or as little as possible. We're making it more of a scenario type of training. Like I know I've been through an academy where it's like I would describe it as Rolodex style training, where it's like, oh, okay, so we're going to do shooting. Cool. Now it's like, oh, you're shooting, but it's one-handed. Okay, now you're shooting, but it's like flashlight in these different positions and all this different techniques. And you put the tools in the toolbox there, buddy. And then it's like, oh, okay, but what if like you're wounded and you're shooting like one-handed, but with your left-handed? Like, okay, like we're gonna, you get a little exposure to that concept, do it a little bit, and then move on. And it's like that seems like sort of, I know you've called it Rolodex style training or scenario based type of stuff.
I think that's how when you start training tactics or anything, the way that law enforcement military trains is Rolodex. It's not principle based. They put you in a situation, you mess it up, you get the answer, you write it down, that goes in the file, right? And then they put you in another situation, mess it up or successful, yep, that's the answer, and it goes in. They do training in a way where they try to expose you to as many things as they possibly can, and now you've got this big Rolodex. The problem is you don't understand the principles that you're trying to promote or execute in any situation. And if you haven't seen that exact situation or a scenario or situation that's similar, then you don't have the answer for it, right? And in my mind, I was a byproduct of Rolodex style training, right, from all throughout the 90s. And it wasn't until a few years of fighting and the wars went on, and now experience kind of went through the roof. He dispelled a lot of things that we thought were true in the 90s and kind of before 2001 and 2003, and then learned some new things, right? Proved some things that we knew to be true back then. And the one thing I find that's really interesting is the guys at the highest level that were always doing this, under the most serious circumstances or when it mattered the most, always looked to competition shooters as the way to get good at shooting.
Yeah.
Right. And that separation, right? One, it's a huge ego check for a lot of people, right? Especially if you're some big warrior, badass, whatever, insert whatever pedigree you want, and then you've got this guy, that little skinny video game dork that lives in Wisconsin, that you show up to and just spends 5 days absolutely fucking destroying you. That's a hard pill for a lot of dudes to swallow. But I think it's necessary that you have to take the shooting out of the tactics. I tell people all the time, you cannot train tactics in absence of shooting, right? You have to have a marksmanship scoreable component to any tactical training you do, which almost doesn't exist in the training space. But when you're shooting, you have to remove the tactics, right? Because you don't want to mire it down with layers of kind of nonsense or hypotheticals or what ifs. I just want to look at the performance side of, can you get the most out of whatever tool you're using?